Hi, so this is Dr. Camilla Alvarez, and I am your professor for ENC 1102, and we're going to discuss interpretation today. In order to understand how to interpret a literary work, such as a short story, a novel, a play, a poem, the way to do that is to first identify certain ideas or major concepts known as themes in the stories, in the literature. So I'm going to go over a few definitions with you, and then we're going to actively work on interpreting a short excerpt from a novel called The Kite Runner. All right, so let me go ahead and get started with that. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, and I'm going to pull over the excerpt. There we go. Okay, so there's a couple of definitions that you should become familiar with. First of all, connotation. So if you look in the middle where it says definitions, you'll see that connotation is a culturally imposed idea or emotion, positive or negative, associated with a word and not found in its definition. So what I'm saying here is that there's a lot of knowledge surrounding a word. So most often when you think of a word, you might think of its definition or denotation. So for example, the word rat. If you looked up rat in a dictionary, you'd find out it's a rodent, it has a tail, it's omnivorous, so that means it eats all different kinds of things, etc. But that doesn't really capture the connotation associated with a rat. So a connotation is that positive or negative emotion, and it extends itself into ideas that are associated with it. So for example, a rat is negatively connotated. So within certain cultures, these connotations will change, even though the definitions will not change. So if someone calls someone else a dirty rat, what does that mean? Well, we know it's negatively connotated. So think about it for a second. What are the implications of that negative emotion, those negative ideas surrounding the word rat? So that was a pause. So the word rat, when you think of it and someone says, oh, you're just a dirty rat to somebody else, that is suggestive that they are untrustworthy, that they might be playing different sides and lying. So that's a lot that you wouldn't necessarily find a rat doing, right? An actual rat. So those are the connotations surrounding that word and specific to the Western culture or America. So when I say that connotation is culturally imposed, that means that you can actually take a concept from one culture, move to a different culture, and it suddenly has different meaning. So for example, the color white. In the West, or in the United States, the color white is often associated with innocence, right? So you might have little children dressed in white when they're going to be christened, for example. But in China, that is actually the color used for mourning. So when someone is going to be buried, the family will wear white. So that's how connotation is influenced culturally, even though the color white is understood to be the same in terms of its definition within the Western culture and Eastern culture. So when you're reading through one of these stories, literary works, you're going to want to look for descriptions and you're going to want to look for connotations. These things will build into themes, T-H-E-M-E-S. So a theme is a central idea and insight connected with a story. So these themes are going to be big ideas. They're large in scope. The concept of innocence, regret, revenge, hope, despair. After you read a story, a literary work, and you've gathered your descriptions and connotations and language that impacts you and lends itself into connotations, after you've done that and you've built into themes, big ideas that you have found in the story, then you can go into a thematic statement. A thematic statement is what a story states about its theme, and you can think of it as a moral of a story, but that is a simplification of the concept. It's really more the interpretation as you individually see it of the story. If you think about it as the moral of the story, it's kind of a way into it, but you don't want it to be something cliched. So you don't want to come up with, don't judge a book by its cover, for example, as a moral of a story. So you want to interpret it so that it lends itself into your understanding of the theme as it is expressed within the story. All right, now bear with me. So there's a couple of questions that are guiding questions that can help you build into your thematic statement, which is your interpretation of the story. First, identify the images that stick for you as you read through it. Then connect to the connotations that are associated with those words, with those images. Build those connotations into themes. And finally, come up with a thematic statement or a truth about humanity as is revealed within the images, connotations, themes that you have understood to be developed within the story or the literary work. All right, so I'm going to go through and I'm going to read this to you. Then I want you to pause the video. I did send the file to you, so you should be able to print it out and or have it up on your computer. And I want you to go through and highlight anything that really sticks out for you. So any of those images, any of those words, anything that really kind of haunts you in a way. All right, so here we go. Chapter 1, December 2001. I became what I am today at the age of 12, on a frigid, overcast day in the winter of 1975. I remember the precise moment, crouching behind a crumbling mud wall, peeking into the alley near the frozen creek. That was a long time ago. But it's wrong what they say about the past, I've learned, about how you can bury it, because the past claws its way out. Looking back now, I realize that I have been peeking into that deserted alley for the last 26 years. One day last summer, my friend Rahim Khan called from Pakistan. He asked me to come see him. Standing in the kitchen with the receiver to my ear, I knew it wasn't just Rahim Khan on the line. It was my past of unatoned sins. After I hung up, I went for a walk along Spreckles Lake on the northern edge of Golden Gate Park. The early afternoon sun sparkled on the water where dozens of miniature boats sailed, propelled by a crisp breeze. Then I glanced up and saw a pair of kites, red with long blue tails, soaring in the sky. They danced high above the trees on the west end of the park, over the windmills, floating side by side like a pair of eyes looking down on San Francisco, the city I now call home. And suddenly Hassan's voice whispered in my head, For you 1,000 times over. Hassan, the hair-lipped kite runner. I sat on a park bench near a willow tree. I thought about something Rahim Khan said just before he hung up, almost as an afterthought. There's a way to be good again. I looked up at those twin kites. I thought about Hassan, thought about Baba, Ali, Kabul. I thought of the life I had lived until the winter of 1975 came and changed everything and made me what I am today. So pause the video here and go through and identify those words, the images, the things that kind of stick out for you, and work through those questions. What images stick in your head? What connotations are associated with those words or images? What themes do you find in this selection? And what thematic statement could you take from this selection? Remember, that is kind of like the moral of the story or the lesson learned. Okay, so now we're starting up again. And what I want to do is I'm going to go through each paragraph with you and just talk about it. So now you should have your highlights and you should have key words that you associate with each of those paragraphs. So in the first paragraph, is it mostly negative or positively connotated? So hopefully you say negative. So words like, I became what I am today at the age of 12. Frigid, overcast day. I'll change that color a little bit. I remember the precise moment crouching behind a crumbling mud wall, peeking into an alley near the frozen creek. A long time ago, but it's wrong what they say about the past. I've learned about how you can bury it. The past claws its way out. And looking back now, I realize I have been peeking into that deserted alley for the last 26 years. So these ideas here, that's acting a little weird. Here we go, hold on. So these ideas here all connect into giving you a more negative perception of that paragraph. So winter, if you unpack that, right, it's known as cold time, a cold time. It's known as a time when things are dead, dying, hibernating. Becoming what you are instead of who you are, that is an implication of something inanimate. So someone's not considering themselves more of a person. They're considering themselves more of a thing. And then becoming what you are at the age of 12, that's a very difficult time to feel like an adult. And this is 26 years later. So I'm kind of jumping around a little bit. But this is 26 years later. So this person feels like they're stuck, right? They're frozen. It's winter. And specifically when he's a child, when he's 12 years old, he's hiding behind a crumbling mud wall, peeking into an alley near a frozen creek. So if you're hiding behind something, that's an indication of fear, right? And then a crumbling mud wall, that's something falling apart. So you can start to assume that he feels insecure, he feels frozen in time, he feels stagnant, and frightened, right? Very frightened. And specifically, in a way, haunted, because he's trying to hide the past, he's ignoring it, he's burying it, right? Like something dead. But it's clawing its way out. So for me, that makes me think of zombies, right? So the past is haunting him, clawing its way out, even though he tried to avoid it by burying it. So overall, it has a very negative sort of tone to it. So thematic words, right, themes for this paragraph. You can think of stagnation. You can think of being haunted. You can think of, well, you can think of PTSD, right? Children also suffer from PTSD when they have extreme events occur within their life. So post-traumatic stress disorder, right? It used to be called shell shock, from soldiers coming back from the war with PTSD. All right, so let's move to the second paragraph. So what are some images that kind of stick out for you there? Well, one of the first things that I'm going to mention is we're in summer now. So we started off in winter and we're going to summer. This right here, past of unatoned sins, that kind of lets you know he's still haunted, he's still regretful. But we have the early afternoon sun, we have a crisp breeze, we have sparkling water, dozens of miniature boats, and then the kites. A pair of kites soaring in the air. That's going to be important. And specifically, side by side like a pair of eyes. Now, the entire story is called The Kite Runner. So as soon as Hassan is identified, Hassan the hair-lipped kite runner, we know that's going to be really important. And specifically what he says, for you 1,000 times over, Hassan the hair-lipped kite runner. So the entire book is called The Kite Runner. So you know that this is about Hassan or something that happened to Hassan that the main character feels guilty about and feels like he needs some sort of redemption. And I would argue that that second paragraph has a lot to do with this concept of redemption, especially because of the unatoned sins line. Past of unatoned sins. Because if it's something's unatoned, that means that you've never asked for forgiveness for it. So we're in summer. So it's different from winter. Summer is when everything's alive, everything's happening. It's associated more with fun, especially he's in a park, right? And we have descriptors like dozens of miniature boats, and then we have the kites sailing in the sky. These are things that children play with. So we're kind of going back into his childhood here, where we're looking at toys, right? Things kids play with, things that he probably played with Hassan. Now, Hassan says to him, for you 1,000 times over. What kind of person would say that to another person? What kind of relationship would you think the main character and Hassan have? So obviously a very close one. So we could argue a strong friendship. We could argue a familial relationship, and we could even potentially argue some sort of lover relationship, right? The story itself reveals that Hassan is actually his half-brother. So it's a very strong familial relationship, but it's also a friendship, a really strong friendship where Hassan and the main character are best friends. Now, if you've never heard the term hair-lipped, it refers to a cleft palate. So if you've ever seen a bunny's face where they have the little indent right in the middle and it goes down, that's what it's a reference to. So that means that Hassan was born with a physical difference in his face, where he has a cleft palate. And that's how he's being referred to in this section. So when you're thinking about this, we have a more positive look, but we still feel sad. It's definitely, this paragraph is definitely more positively connotated than the first one. Time has passed. He still feels stuck in the past. He still feels like he needs redemption. And you get a sense of nostalgia from it, where he's remembering the past with a bittersweet sort of feeling to it. Now, Hassan, as I said, is connected to the title. He's connected to the kites here. And look at the description of the kites right here in the purple. So the kites are red with long blue tails, and they're soaring in the sky, floating side by side like a pair of eyes. So whenever you see red eyes with long blue tails, you're seeing crying eyes, right? So that connects to that sadness, to that nostalgia. It connects to Hassan. So he feels like Hassan is crying, right? He's looking over San Francisco and feels sad. We do find out that Hassan has passed on. So let's look at the third and final paragraph here in the introduction. So some images that stick out. He's sitting by a willow tree. There's a way to be good again. And I would argue this last part is really important as well. Okay. So if you've ever seen Pocahontas, you know that Grandmother Willow is a willow tree. If you've never seen a picture of a willow, you want to go ahead and Google that. They have very long vines, and usually they're connected to water. So usually those vines are kind of dripping into the water, and it looks often, it has been mythologized as a woman crying, therefore Grandmother Willow in Pocahontas. So there's this concept of a weeping willow. So they represent sadness. When you think about the Western culture and unpack these connotations with these words, you start to see these connections once again in here to sadness. Regret would be a very strong theme, especially with there is a way to be good again. We have redemption as a theme. And once again, at the very end, notice that he ends, made me what I am today, which is exactly how he started. I became what I am today. So he still feels lost. He still feels like he is an object. He's not a person. So in terms of themes, we have childhood, we have innocence, we have regret, we have hope. There's hope here in the last one, so it's a little bit more positively connotated with still that sense of nostalgia and sadness. We have the concept of redemption. We definitely have regret and the past. So if you were trying to come up with a thematic statement for this, and with a thematic statement, what you do is you look at all of the elements, all of the themes, all of the connotations, and you try to think of, okay, well, what's something that would put all this together and make sense as to the truth that the author is trying to reveal. So this is going to be unique to each of you. You're going to have your own sense of what the truth is based upon your life experiences, based upon what you know to be true of the world. So a possible theme, a possible interpretation for this would be you must address your past or you will be stuck reliving it. Another one could be redemption can be found when you atone for your sins. All right? So there's a lot of different ways to go into this. There's a lot of different interpretations that you can come up with. One of the fun things about literature is that you can really explore different meanings, and something you've read in the past, when you read it again, can actually change. It can change its meaning because you have different life experiences. So it's kind of cool. Anyway, this process, exactly what we just did, is what you're going to do as you read through each of these stories, and hopefully you find one, a story or a poem or one of the plays that you really connect with. And then this is the process that you would go through in order to interpret it. All right, so I hope that helps. And I'll send this video to you as well as send you this handout so you can work on it. Bye.